I'm Intern Rick, and I would like to welcome you to the very first episode of Beyond the Box. I'm going to take a couple minutes here, and I'm going to briefly explain exactly what we're going to be doing here and what the show's about, and then we're just going to kind of jump right into things. Now, I know a lot of times whenever we buy our toys, we get them home, we get them out of the package, we play with them for a little bit, and even though we really like them, we love them, we kind of realize that there are some things that we would like to be different. Whether it's a small variant in a paint application, an accessory, or a minor sculpt detail. There are a lot of times some minor things there that kind of bug us that we would like to be different. I know there are a lot of you out there who have taken the strides to fixing those problems on your own, customizing your toys to make them better. And that's exactly what this show is going to be about. This is going to be about taking your toys and really taking them beyond the box, if you will, taking them beyond what the manufacturer capabilities are able to do for, the different paint patterns and the cost of manufacturing a figure at limited means. So, with that in mind, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. And if you watched last week's episode of It Figures, many of you will know that the Awesome Dirt would like a custom Disco Faker, based off of course, the amazing fan favorite Disco Skeletor that everybody loves, and I'm sure is going to be the next Masters of the Universe Classic Skeletor variant. I don't see why not. But so that's what we're going to be doing for our first project. For the next couple weeks, we're going to be working on this Faker figure. Taking a nice step-by-step, in-depth process as to how to get a good paint application on this figure, and who knows, maybe we'll do some other alterations. So typically, whenever I sit down to customize a figure, to do a custom paint application, normally I would just kind of jump right in and start painting the figure, and what ends up coming out in the end product is what ends up coming out from whatever my artistic feeling is feeling at that point for that particular figure. So with this particular figure, I kind of took a different approach. I sat down, I actually did a sketch and a painting of the figure so I could get a color pattern down to kind of give me an idea of what it was I was going to be working with. So even though it's not finished, I'll share it with you. This is my custom Faker, Disco Faker. As you can see, he's going to have some pretty rockin' green hair, nice orange face like the Disco Skeletor does, and some nice gold armor and accents. Obviously this painting isn't finished yet. I wanted to get the show started. So anyway, typically a lot of times when people start to customize figures, they run into an issue whenever they start painting of either paint's not sticking to their product, or the paint's coming on too heavy and they end up kind of looking like they're kind of caked on and chalky and thick, and just really not what you're looking for whenever you're doing this type of painting. So the first step in starting our custom Disco Faker is actually going to be priming said Disco Faker. Now, because this figure has the robot decal on the chest, I've actually masked over the decal. I'm going to do my best to paint around this decal, so I don't have to lose it or do some kind of hand-painted decal that there's just no way that my painting skills can replicate this nice screened decal. I wasn't too precise with the measurements because I figured I'll just dry brush around the edges of it and then fill it in, and once I seal it, no big deal anyway. So ordinarily, whenever it comes to priming figures, I am a big advocate of ripping them apart. A lot of times it does mean that you end up losing articulation whenever you put your figures back together, but then again, a lot of times with custom figures, you really don't want to go moving them around too much and playing with them anyway, because it's going to, whether the application is sealed or not, a lot of times you're going to run into issues with scratching and removing paint. So with this figure, I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach with it. I know Dirt likes to move his figures around and kind of play with them a little bit and stuff, so I'm going to prime him actually whole. I'm just going to pop the head off and prime the head separately, and then I'm going to be pretty careful with how I go about priming this figure. I'm not actually going to film the priming process. I'm going to do that separately, and then I'll show you the product afterwards, but I will give you some tips. Obviously, you want to do this in a very well ventilated area. You don't want to be inhaling all of these fumes from your paint. Aerosol paints are pretty harsh to inhale, so whether you do it indoors in a well ventilated fanned area or you do it outdoors, provided the weather will cure the paint, that's totally up to you. You want to hold your can a good 6 to 8 inches away, maybe even more, from what it is that you're painting, and just kind of, if you will, lightly go back and forth, spray painting what it is. You don't want to, otherwise you're going to end up saturating your toys, your accessories, your figures with way too much paint. You'll end up having issues with it drying and being tacky, or even running and pooling up in some areas and throwing off your sculpt. That's another thing. You don't want to be too heavy with the paint, because the more primer you use in order to paint your figure, the more you're actually taking away from the sculpt and the plastic. So again, you want to be sparing, but you want it to be enough to give it a nice, solid, light coat in order for whatever paint it is that you're going to paint your figures with to adhere. So with that in mind, we're going to take a break, and we'll come right back, and I will have all of this primed and ready to go, and then we will start looking into some different painting techniques, and I will explain the colorway. All right? Thanks. All right, guys, welcome back. Took a little break here and got the figure primed up and getting ready to start the paint application here. I just wanted to take a second and show you that, there is some craziness that can sometimes happen. I don't know if you can really make this out, but sometimes if you use old spray paint for your primer and whatever, you can get this nice, funky little texture that is really undesirable, and you really don't want it to be there, but I think for what we're doing, I'll probably be able to work with it, and it won't be that big of a deal. Anyway, and I'll probably hold off on doing the armor until I can get something else to prime those pieces with, because I really don't want the battle armor pieces to be like that. So anyway, I also wanted to tell you that something to keep in mind whenever it comes to finding materials to prime with is you want to make sure that whatever spray paint or whatever it is that you end up using to prime your figures, you want to make sure that it's plastic bonding. If it doesn't say plastic bonding on there, if it says good for woods and metals and whatever, but doesn't say anything about plastic, there's a good chance that it won't cure and it will remain tacky. Especially on more rubbery kind of plastics, like say your master's loincloths and some of the swords that are a little bendy, like Catra's sword, if you will. So anyway, we got the figure nice and primed up, and now we're gonna, like I said, just kind of jump right into the paint process. I chose white to paint this figure with. I usually go with a white or black flat primer to prime my figures with, depending on what the overall tone of the figure is that I'm painting. If it's a darker figure, I'll probably use a darker base coat and then just use the hues in the paints to bring out the tones. If it's a brighter figure, I'll use a lighter primer, and then again use the paints and the hues to bring out the tones. So I guess we're going to start mixing up our paints. For this project, though Dirt actually supplied me with some Games Workshop paints, we're actually going to use Apple Barrel Craft paints. The reason we're going to use Apple Barrel Craft paints is because painting supplies, art supplies, can become very costly and very expensive. Apple barrel paints are very cheap. You can get these nice size 2-ounce tubes of apple barrel paint from almost anywhere that carries craft supplies for between 49 and 69 cents a piece. Whereas most like model paint places, whatever, you're going to get these little bitty tubes, like little bitty jars of paint for the same price. And you don't want to use those enamels anyway because they really don't work for this type of paint job. So we have got a color palette kind of laid out for us as far as what we're going to use. Obviously, Disco Skeletor has black arms and legs except for his bare feet and hands, which are still the classic kind of periwinkle blue. All of his armor is gold with orange accents. His face is bright orange with that nice gnarly lime green. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of step things up a notch with this faker. We're going to make him... Disco may not even be the proper, terminology we would want to use for this figure. We might even want to call him Raver Faker because he is going to have some gnarly, flippin', bright lime green hair. And he's going to have an orange face, an orange mug, and of course he's going to keep the signature shiny metallic blue chest that the Disco Skeletor has. And we're going to go from there. So what we're going to start with is we're going to start with painting the arms and painting the legs, getting that black in there, so we don't have to get the black out anymore and worry about it either dingying up the tones of our other paints or even, God forbid, completely smearing in somewhere else and giving us a problem that we have to go back and correct. So I actually have the big 8-ounce bottle of Apple Barrel Black and Apple Barrel White because these are the colors that I tend to go through the most. So we're going to give this a nice good mix and throw some paint down here. I tend to overuse paint. It's cheap, it's better to mix up a little more than what you're going to end up using than to mix up something to a consistency and end up running out of that particular consistency and trying to match that consistency whenever you mix up more. So I've actually had my brushes soaking here for a little while today, trying to get them nice and clean and nice and soft from painting on the faker painting that I started earlier today and last night. So I'm actually going to try to do this kind of like a hand-in-hand technique. I know as the show progresses, we'll probably work with the format and change things up a little bit, but I really want it to be as hands-on, as in your face as possible, so you can pick up as much of this information as you can. So we want to get our paint laid down, and we want to thin it down. I mean, with this Apple Barrel paint, the thicker the better, or the thinner the better. You don't want it to be so thin that it kind of looks like watercolor paints with a little bit of water in it. Just a little bit thicker than that. You don't want it to be transparent. You want it to be a good thin, solid color, and then just start laying your paint down. With this particular figure, because his arms and legs are the solid black, it's just going to be that one particular tone being laid down. But later on, whenever we get into other figures where it may be a skin-toned character, or a human skin-toned character, where you would actually want to lay down contrasting colors underneath what you're actually going to be building towards, so you get those nice dark definitions underneath of your paint job, and then you can bring out the detail whenever you lay the lighter colors over the top. Now I'm noticing as I'm painting here that the rough, weird texture that I got from the primer is kind of going away, which is I kind of figured it might whenever I primed it. That's why I wasn't too worried about it. I really didn't think that it would require soaking it in turpentine or anything like that to remove the prime and start over. So again, I'm just kind of sitting here and I'm just going to start filling it in. Filling in all those big spots. Just trying to, you know, not take too much time, but not be too sloppy with it either. Now, the one thing that I will say is whenever you thin these apple barrel paints down and you use a lighter tone for primer, you will probably have to do a few coats. It does become a little tedious and time consuming, but it will be worth it in the end. Trust me on this, it will be worth it in the end than just slopping that paint on there as thick as you possibly can. You want to get these nice even tones, so in the end your end product will look so much better than the bare plastic you get whenever you open your product from Mattel or Hasbro or who have you. So as you know, I'll try to bring this in. As you can see, I started painting the right arm here. Nice, thin, consistent layer. And I'm just going to keep doing that. Just going to keep laying it in. Man, this texture from this old primer is really bizarre. I've never seen spray paint give off this texture before. But like I said, I was really anxious to get in and start the show and get started on Doug's Disco Faker here. Whenever I painted his Disco Skeletor for him, I felt so bad because I had just started school and my time was really limited for what I was able to do, so it took me probably 7 or 8 months to get that figure finished and to get it back to him. And I'm determined that that is not going to happen this time. That I'm going to get this figure done on the show so you guys can see it as it happens, and then probably present it to him on an episode of It Figures. So you want to be careful whenever you're getting close to the cuffs and the armor and whatever. You don't want to, you know, it's almost like going back to that coloring book mentality. You know, you don't want to get outside of the black lines. Well, whenever you've got a particular area that you're trying to cover with paint, you don't want it to bleed over into the areas that you're not painting. And again, you know, for any of you out there who do this every day, you know, I'm not trying to talk to anybody like you're idiots. I'm just trying to be as basic and as fundamental with this as I can, so everybody can learn something. You know, I learn every day. You know, I learn every day that I do stuff, and I don't really necessarily consider myself that great of an artist, but I've got the desire and the drive to do it, so why not share it with people? It's kind of weird. In some spots, the texture of this paint almost makes it look like the plastic started to melt or something whenever the plastic hit it, or whenever the paint hit it, which I know is not the case, but it is filling in pretty nice. Now, how you go about doing things is, you know, as far as the order or whatever, is really up to you. I I try to do my big areas first and then go on to the smaller areas afterwards. That way I don't end up with an inconsistent mess, which is very easy to do whenever you're painting figures. Now, I would like to say, at any point, if any of you have any questions as far as customizing, making your own toys, whatever, feel free to shoot me an email. You can reach me at rlosc1216@llcc.edu currently. That'll probably change in the future as I'm taking a break from school, but right now that's where you can get me at. Or if you want to just shoot over to the forums at popculturenetwork.com, throw up a question up there. I'm on the forums. I read the forums all the time, and I'll see your question. I'd be more than happy to either, answer you directly or to address it here on the show. And then we're all learning. Again, that's what this is about. This is about making our figures better and having fun and learning in the process. So I've about got a nice solid coat on his right arm here, and then I'll move on to his left arm, and that's kind of how I go about doing things. I'll get a nice solid coat on one area, and then I'll move on to the next one so that one can dry, and then so on and so forth, and I just kind of repeat that cycle. That way everything has an opportunity to cure for the same amount of time. That way I'm not going back through and sticking my fingers in anything that I shouldn't be sticking my fingers in. So thin this paint down some more so I can. And something that I kind of always criticize myself for and tend to get criticism for from other people is I'm very tedious about how I paint. I like the control of a small brush, even though I could use a much bigger brush to cover more area and save time. I feel a lot safer and a lot more comfortable using something that I can just really get in the cracks and the crevices and keep that control and not worrying about mucking anything up or making anything too nasty. Trying to pay close attention to the articulation points. These Masters Classics figures, much like Marvel Legends and DC Universe, with these points of articulation, they've got some really deep crevices that you want to make sure you get in there and get those, because boy, if you don't, whenever your paint job is quote-unquote finished, those areas will really, really stand out. Like I said, just laying it on. Kind of blot your brush. I call this the stippling technique. You just kind of do little dots with your brush here and there. That way you lay your paint down nice and evenly. Kind of zoom in and give you a little here, just kind of, just like that. That way you don't get brush strokes. Your paint lays down evenly. Any air bubbles or fluid bubbles that you might have, you work out, and you just get a nice even tone. So Man, I've never seen spray paint do this before. If any of you out there have issues with finding plastic bonding spray paint, my trusty fall to is Fusion by Krylon. It says right on the can, plastic bonding spray paint, bonds to plastic. You can find it at most places. It tends to be a little bit more expensive. I think Hobby Lobby stopped carrying it against my advising. They never listen to me anyway. But I believe you can get it at Walmart for like $4 and change or something like that. I think Meijer carries it. But yeah, there are lots of different places out there that carry it. You know, just like I said, make sure that it's plastic bonding spray paint. Otherwise, you will end up with a mess that you do not want to deal with. So, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to try and get some more of this black paint work done. And whenever we come back, I think we'll kind of take a look at some dry brushing techniques and get started on this faker head. And we'll see you then.